Starting out as an idealistic servant of the God of Light, she ended up coming back from the grave with an inky spear of darkness to destroy the very same God of Light. Is Elspeth evil now? Greetings, owners of fine luxury cardboard rectangles. We are here today to discuss the concept of whether Elspeth has gone over to the dark side. Is Elspeth now actually an evil or villainous character? Now, this video will include a spoiler for the Elspeth Planeswalker card from Theros Beyond Death. Technically, I already did a spoiler video on this when we had the showcase version of the card, but honestly, when you take the information from both of these cards, it paints a different story about what's going on with Elspeth. So I want to dive into this and examine what's going on and figure out, do we think that she's evil here or not? And what we're going to do is we're going to start by actually looking and talking about her weaponry. So there's a card that represents it from the original Theros block, and that is Godsend. This is actually the second stage of the weapon tier. It didn't originally start as Godsend. Godsend was originally a sword, and the sword was forged by Theros when he was planning on going to war with Heliod. So Theros is the god of the forge, things like that. Heliod is the god of light, the sun god, right? So he is the emblazoned sort of, I am the god of goodness kind of concept. So anyhow, what happened was Theros and Heliod ended up clashing. During this clash, the sword that Theros had forged fell from the heavens. Now, Elspeth had just happened to planeswalk her way to Theros as this sword was falling from the sky. She essentially caught the sword and then planeswalked away, right? So this sword that was meant to be the destruction of Heliod just kind of disappeared from the plane altogether, just in a blink, right? And the gods, not really familiar with planeswalkers, they don't know what's going on. So you flash forward to later in the future where Elspeth has returned to Theros. She's drawn to that plane for reasons that we'll get into a little further into the video, but she's drawn naturally to Theros, right? That is a place that she feels comfortable. So she returns to that plane, and Heliod actually sees that she has this chaos sword that's capable of damaging gods. And at first he freaks out, thinking that she is an agent of evil, that she's there to try and basically overthrow Heliod or destroy him. So he is originally her adversary. After a little bit of time, Heliod comes to the realization that she bears him no ill will at this time and may actually even be the sun's champion. So that's when he takes the Chaos Sword and he reforges it into this spear, the Godsend, right? And Godsend's a pretty funky card. You take a look at it. It's 2/8 and a colorless for a legendary piece of equipment that gives the equipped creature +3/+3. When equipped creature blocks or becomes blocked by one or more creatures, you may exile one of those creatures, and opponents can't cast cards with the same name as cards exiled with Godsend. Equips for 3 mana. Now you can see when you look at this, the exiling ability would clearly be something you could use on a god creature, and once it's exiled, your opponent can't cast more copies. So that's effectively, symbolically, just removing a god, okay? At this point, you can't bring the god back. Godsend has gotten rid of it, right? And that's harnessing the chaos powers that Theros put into the blade. So this Godsend tool, it plays a lot like the Chaos Sword, the Godsend tool, the different stages that it takes, they mark the different phases of Elspeth's existence. And so when Elspeth is granted this spear, that's when she becomes Elspeth's son's champion. And that name will actually be important when we talk about the spoiler for today, because it's going to be basically the polar opposite of this. So Elspeth's son's champion is 2 white, 4 colors for a 4 loyalty planeswalker, +1 loyalty, put 3 1/1 white soldier creature tokens onto the battlefield, destroy all creatures with power 4 or greater for -3 loyalty, or her ultimate for -7 is you get an emblem with creatures you control, get +2/+2, and have flying. And you can see in the artwork depicted that she is standing on some sort of bridge. She's got the Godsend spear just standing there while her robes are flapping in the breeze. And it's like she's standing in a defensive position in front. You can see like houses and things like that in the background. You can see those little Greek palaces. This is all designed around like Greek mythology, right? But you can see it does look like she is like the defender. You have to cross this bridge. She's here. I am the sun's champion. So what happened to get us from Elspeth, sun's champion, to Elspeth, sun's nemesis, right? That means a nemesis is enemy, right? In some cases, you could consider it arch enemy, biggest enemy, or at least one of your major enemies. So Elspeth went from being sun's champion to sun's nemesis. What happened here? How did we get to this point? Well, Elspeth's sun's nemesis is 2 white and 2 colorless for a 5 loyalty planeswalker, -1, up to 2 target creatures you control each get +2/+1 until end of turn. -2, create 2 1/1 white human soldier creature tokens, and that's a very frequent ability we see on Elspeth cards, is creating the creature tokens. And -3, you gain 5 life. Interestingly enough, this Elspeth doesn't really have an ultimate. I mean, you could try and argue the -3 is an ultimate, but let's be real, it doesn't feel like an ultimate ability. But this Elspeth has a very interesting ability. Escape. 2 white, 4 colorless, exile 4 other cards from your graveyard, and you may cast this card from your graveyard for its escape cost. So essentially, this is Elspeth's Sun Nemesis' ability to return over and over and over. What it signifies is her escape from the underworld. Because what happens in the story is she is actually betrayed by Heliod, god of the sun, after she does a great service for him as well. Xenagos, who was a crazy planeswalker, he managed to elevate himself to god status. He managed to invade the pantheon of Theros and become a god. Now, Elspeth, she really enjoyed the concept of Theros with the gods, and basically for her, the idea is that a realm ruled over by gods would be a place of stability, because where she originally came from was horrific. Her original homeworld was taken over by Phyrexians, and the Phyrexians, in a weird way of showing that they care about other Phyrexians, took some Phyrexians that had broken brains that were kind of insane and would put them into they essentially almost used humans. Like, you know how there are comfort animals, or like if you're going to university, they'll have like a puppy room where you can go and all these little puppies will come up and lick you and you're like, yay, puppy town. It's that kind of a concept, but they did it with humans, where the Phyrexians took humans and put them in these cages, in these areas with broken-brained Phyrexians. So you've got a situation where Elspeth was actually one of these humans that were trapped in there with all the broken-brained Phyrexians. And that may have caused her some mental damage. That may actually have left some kind of Phyrexian taint upon her to a degree, which may also explain what's going on with the change to Elspeth here. But anyways, she walked away from that in a really stressful moment. Her first planeswalking moment was to escape from that Phyrexian setup, right? And she wandered around for a while looking for somewhere comfortable she could call home. And so for a while, she spent time on Bant, but then Alara reforged itself from the different shards back into the main thing, and she ended up in a bunch of situations there that led her to be dissatisfied. So she found herself drawn back to Theros, the place where gods ruled over everything, and she could find some kind of sense of right and stability. So she comes to this plane. Xenagos is threatening the existence of the entire plane by basically trying to make it into a massive keg party, where everybody's just going crazy and destroying everything. All that matters is revelry, partying. That's what Xenagos was, essentially. The god of partying as hard as you can, frat boy style. So he became a god, and Heliod entrusted Elspeth to take him out. Use Godsend, destroy Xenagos. That's what needs to happen. So she actually succeeds in destroying Xenagos. But what happens is Heliod isn't the type of god of light that you could hope for. He's petty and vindictive, and basically he turns around and says, great, yeah, you took care of Xenagos, but here's the thing. You're a servant of a god, and no servant of a god, no god's champion should ever know more than he does or have seen more places. Because she's a planeswalker, she has a much wider range of experiences. And this enrages Heliod, and he actually takes Godsend and he jams it into Elspeth. He just stabs her with the Godsend. She ends up losing her life in this process. The Godsend actually gets shattered to bits, and that gets reforged into a funerary mask for her. So normally, when you go to the underworld in the world of Theros, you get a clay mask forged for you, where it's just like, or I mean, do you call it forged? I guess you don't call it forged. I guess you call it fired, because they probably fire them in kilns, right? So they make a clay mask. You wear the clay mask, and it helps to protect your memories from erosion to a certain degree, but they will still kind of slowly fade away. And also, it's part of what traps you there in the underworld. Well, Elspeth is not bound by the normal rules of mortals, because she is no ordinary individual. She's a planeswalker. So she actually gets a mask made of gold and the gems that were originally located within the Godsend / Chaos Sword, right? And so we actually saw that. We saw that in the token artwork that came along with Throne of Eldraine, where they have Elspeth and she's kind of peeking out behind a somewhat fractured mask with the gems embedded into it. Now, when we take a look at Elspeth's son's Nemesis and what's going on with her artwork, well, all of a sudden she has a spear again, right? She has what's essentially the Godsend, but it looks wildly, wildly different, right? You take a look at it, and first of all, I mean, one of the most noticeable things is that it's dripping black, inky ichor, where you just like it's just basically almost seems like liquefied corruption is leaking off of this spear. Up at the spear tip, it seems more like black essence is leaching off of the top of it. You can see the two gems that are the hallmark of every incarnation of this glowing there with that kind of purple, almost looking like a set of malevolent eyes in this case. But the tip of the spear is way more ornate. Godsend was a very straightforward, like straight and narrow blade on a long pole arm kind of deal. Well, this has the long shaft as well, but the actual head of it is this crazy sort of, it looks like it has multiple, it looks like it's actually a trident now. It genuinely does look like it's a trident with the black murkiness coming off of it. And part of the reason that I say it looks like a trident is because we can actually see the same weapon when we look at the showcase version of Elspeth's son's Nemesis. Now look, I believe these are showcase versions. I could be incorrect. They might just be some other sort of specialized artwork that are also being included. But to me, this is the showcase similar to those storybook artworks that we saw. That's what this is. It depicts Elspeth as a marbled statue, but you get a actual better look at the newly reforged Godsend, or whatever the weapon's called now. It might be called the God Ender, whatever it is, right? God's End. That's not a bad name. Anyhow, you can see when you look at it, you can see that what looks like it has multiple tips to the spear, and then there are also that black energy kind of coalescing around it. It's a little harder to represent that black energy in the same way when you've got a stationary statue, but I think they did a pretty good job. Now, what's important to note as well behind Elspeth is the fact that you can see Elspeth being depicted defeating Xenagos on the left-hand side. And when I originally saw this, I thought that this was just two versions of Xenagos. But if you actually look closer, on the right-hand side of the artwork, you can see that she's driving this weapon into the chest of Heliod. That's what's going on. And you can see from looking at it, actually, it looks like it has 5 points. It's a weird, it's not a trident if it's got 5 points. It's a five-dent, I guess. So you can see her driving that right down into the chest, presumably directly into the heart of Heliod, which makes it seem like at some point in the storyline for Theros Beyond Death, we are going to see Elspeth return and destroy Heliod. Now the question is she evil now, right? Because just because you're a white card doesn't necessarily mean you're good, the same way that just because you're on a black card doesn't necessarily mean you're evil. Is she evil? How did she get this spear? There are a number of different options, right? It could be something like the influence of Erebos, or it could be not God-related at all. This could be the influence of Ashiok, because when we look at Ashiok, we can see that Ashiok has a lot of black spectral energy diffusing off of them at all times, flowing up directly between the horns and in other places as well. But this sort of black miasma is associated with Ashiok, but I could easily see it being associated as well with any black aligned god. So has Elspeth intentionally aligned herself with an evil god? Has she intentionally aligned herself with Ashiok, who is definitely not a good person? Or has Elspeth simply accepted their aid without really becoming their ally to accomplish her goal? Is she destroying Heliod out of a sense of necessity, where she feels like the world is better suited to not have a god that is fickle like that, who will destroy one of their champions? Is it out of vengeance, where she's dissatisfied? Does she intend to actually take Heliod's space and become a new god of Theros? Will her destroying Heliod lead to perhaps the installation of someone like a Johnny as a new god of Theros? Or will there be an imbalance in the pantheon and there will no longer be a white god? Will there just be an absence of the god of light? How will that affect Theros overall? Are Elspeth's actions, are they spurred on by a sense of justice? Are they spurred on out of bitter anger over her destruction and betrayal? What exactly is causing her to wield this crazy looking spear? Speaking of crazy, honestly, I just want to mention on a side note, I think that her hair and her head and her little headpiece, they look a little silly. I don't know if they were going for a Wonder Woman look with her, but it just, I don't know. It looks kind of goofy. And in both versions of the artwork, her hair looks a little bit goofy. They gave her goofy hair on the statue version as well. But that's a minor nitpick. What I really wanted to talk about was, is Elspeth evil now? So I'm interested in your thoughts. What do you think? Is she evil now? Is she still good but doing what needs to be done? Is it vengeance? Is it righteousness? Is it trying to fix things? What do you guys think? Let me know in the comments below. I thank you all for coming by. What I'm going to do is I'm going to leave some links around me here to different videos on this channel and my other channel where me and my lovely lady make fun, funny videos. So go ahead and check those out. I want to give a big shout out to my patrons and channel members. Thank you very much for supporting my channel. And remember, together we are the sixth color of magic.